The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. It's one of my favorite scenes from The Matrix, and I'm sure you remembered if you've seen that movie as well. It draws so many parallels, I believe, to Christianity and this idea that we are called to not be of the world. That is our highest calling, to not be attached to the world. And there's so many different quotes. And in this video, I'm going to share my view, one of the ways that I look at it, and I hope that helps you guys. But do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. John 2:15. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Romans 12:2. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Mark 8:36 and Matthew 16:26. That's a very well-known quote. What shall man gain if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. John 2:17. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity against God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. James 4:4. For everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. John 5:4. Who is it that overcomes the world? Only the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. John 5:5. You hear a lot of these quotes. You see a lot of these quotes in the Bible, but what does that mean to overcome that world? What is and we hear different views today. There's different people who will say, how do you get out of the matrix? And there's a lot of ideas that a lot of the matrix is, it's actually the advice to get out of the matrix is more of the matrix. And I would define it very simply. It's my high budget quality stuff here. Your why and the world. And the world represents X on the horizontal, and the Y represents the vertical. And the only way that we rise, we get closer to God, is we start with Y. Seek and ye shall find. That's right here. Why? And it sounds very simple. It's very nice little graph I have here, right? Sounds simple, but in practice, most people are living here. Their why is the world. It's the money, it's the comfort, it's not thinking on a deeper why, and maybe a little bit of why. And as you go up with the why, there's more of this. There's that's the attractive thing because we're all looking for love. What does that mean? Well, when most people say love, it's actually of the world. They love the world. They love the, the there's an attachment, and we're not called to not be in the world. We're called to be in the world, but not of it. And to not be of it requires kind of cutting that umbilical cord of the attachments of the world, the things that make us feel good, the things that make us, they blind us to deeper truths. They, this is the whole idea of purpose over pleasure. But what is the purpose? Well, everyone has a different purpose, but what is the common theme that unites us? And this pattern of behavior, I thought that was great because there's spoken on that before. Spirit of the Father is this pattern of behavior of the Father. And in Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. I talk a lot about this on the channel. You know, why not do the thing that feels good or the thing that it makes people feel good? And you're seeing a lot of disconnects with a lot of people now. One group of people believes one thing, another group of people believes another thing. And how do you fight against a bad idea? And what happens when people are attached to bad ideas? How do you attack the bad idea, not the person? How do you love the person but hate the sin that they believe. And who gets to decide? Well, I think that just as this says that, well, first of all, we have to go through within ourselves. We have to face our own sin because otherwise we're hypocrites. So we start by saying we're hypocrites. We start by humbling ourselves. We start by sharing our mistakes and why we believe things are wrong. And I think that's the key starting point. It's not where we end. We should continue to lead other people the right way because again, everyone has a different view right now what that right way is. And not now, I mean throughout time. And it's I think the deep conviction for this is that as you see it within, you start to see it without. And as you see it, it's painful because you realize how deep the attachments run, the need for validation, the need to be liked. And you have to start again, you start with yourself, you see that validation. I know I've seen that in my life, and there's parts we want to be liked. We need that attention. And when we start to say, no, that's not true. I don't need to be liked. I don't need, and many people will say this, but you really get to see it in action when it actually plays out, when you don't validate good behavior and you do your best to correct other people. And if there's a disconnect, maybe you could have said it a different way. And that's kind of the game. You have to correct other people and then have the wisdom of knowing when and how and and um and why you're doing it, being aware, am I correcting other, maybe I need to correct something myself. It requires tremendous discernment. And again, you start with yourself. Why did I believe this? Why is this the wrong way? Why is this the right way? Again, going back to this chart, it starts with why. And you'll find a lot of people on the path to why that don't like the question why. Some people don't like the question why. They live here. They're happy here. They're happy because there's a lot to get from the world. You'd be lying if you didn't say that. You'd be lying if you didn't give the devil its due. You'd be lying if you didn't see the attraction to it. There's a lot of power in comfort. There's a lot of power in worldly power. There's more power in the why because that gives you the what you're seeking the answer to give you um to leave that behind you. And that has more power. You don't get pulled into, you don't operate anymore on validation or any of this. And when you do operate, the only validation that's worth it is right validation. Now, it's similar to in psychology, the idea of positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. You should validate people who do the right thing. That's a good thing. I spoke about this in previous podcasts that there's there's nothing wrong with validation. We need validation on a certain level. We need to feel that love. We need to have that. It's kind of an oxygen. But just as bad, we also need people to correct our bad behavior as a collective. And the more that people accept or rationalize bad behavior as good, then collectively we suffer. And it becomes harder to make that point. And we're seeing that now. This is where you see this division. We are in a time where we need peacemakers and not just a piece of peace. We need real people. We need people who have been, they see between the both sides, the illusion. To be in the world but not of it, we have to start, first of all, by rejecting the world. And this can come off a lot as suppression or repression. I must not do this. I must not do that. And this is why it I believe that obviously there is discipline. There is a discipline involved, but there is also, which I would say is more power. It's the understanding. Why should I give up the world? That's a great place to start because a lot of people say, well, why would I do this? And why would I do that? Rather than you have a lot of well, it's forcing it, and you can tell the difference between those who follow Christ and they live it and those who are preaching about it. And Christ talks about fasting, for example. This is a great thing that when you fast, don't tell other people about it. Don't be bragging about it, right? That the point of fasting and the point of denying yourself isn't so the ego can slide in and say, hey, look at me, I'm fasting. Look at me, look how Christ-like I am. It's the idea that outwardly you look so great, but inwardly you're sick. You're a ravenous wolf, right? You're pretending. It's even worse than someone who is corrupt. Someone who's honestly corrupt. They don't care. At least they're being honest. The worst is the pretend person who wants to convince you that they're so holy, right? And that's why I really have an appreciation, and also in part why I think setting the example, at least for the people that follow me on here, is that I set the example through humility. How can I share the things that I've struggled with, that I had to overcome, that my blocks, the things that I'm ashamed of? Now, not going into everything in my personal life, but enough that really kind of humbles me, that I'm not this holier than thou person. I struggle just like everybody else, but that's not an excuse to stay down, to stay of the world. And everybody has their different sin that they struggle with. The worldly pleasures of life, the things that feel good, whether it be sex or power, or other sins would be laziness. For me, getting up in the morning was such a hard thing for me. I was always more of, sleeping in. That was a habit that I continued for a long time. So to convince myself, how would I change that? Is not an easy thing to do. These habits of behavior, and then if you have it as a collective, these different habits of pride, for example, being exemplified, then if everybody's proud, then we are a divided nation. But if we have humility, that brings us together. Now we understand that there's kind of this there's a balance between forgiveness and accountability, and you need both of those. And when we are disconnected, when we're in a state of pride, then it's this false view of perfection, and everybody's putting on a front to pretend, rather than owning their humility and truly being born again of an understanding, of a higher understanding, that your mistakes are deeper callings for why you're doing what you're doing. So the way that we break out of the matrix is we start by asking why. We start with humility. Humility is what makes us rise up. Humility says, maybe why this, why that, and listening to different people and challenging ideas. Some of the greatest people that I follow, people who host different podcasts, they have different people on, completely different worldviews, and and to challenge those worldviews. And there's a difference between I'm right and one person I'm right versus another person saying I'm right, versus two people who maybe disagree, but they welcome their ideas to be challenged because they are truly interested in that. And it's very rare to have those type of people, because that pride runs really deep, especially in our culture. Don't tell anybody how to live your life, all this. I'm just trying to be happy. And there's these kind of false mottos that are put out that are easily believable, because on a surface level it sounds reasonable, right? It's well, just be happy. Just why, what would be wrong with that? Well, when you challenge, for example, that idea, well, what if doing drugs makes you happy? What if doing evil makes you happy? And how do you define evil? What is evil to you? What is evil? Why would this be evil? These are the kind of questions that just get the fire going, that, okay, we can agree there is a right way to live. This action is bad. And, and just peeling the layers back. And it's complex. And a lot of people get stuck in the complexity, but I believe you have to go through the complexity. Why? And then at a certain point, I think this is where revelation really comes in. You just understand it on a deep level. This is where wisdom comes in versus knowledge, because you can have all the knowledge in the world. If you don't know how to speak, knowledge is potential power. One of my favorite quotes: knowledge is potential power. You can have all the knowledge in the world. You can ask all the questions, have all the knowledge up here, but at a certain point, you have to apply it. And you say the right thing, but you said it at the wrong time. You said the right thing, but you said it the wrong way. You said the right thing, but you were speaking to someone who didn't want to listen to you. So knowing when, how, and when and how, and having that sense of if you should even act in that situation, that comes through really reflecting, going on the inner reflection of your own experience, and what works, what doesn't. And it's a growth in trusting thyself. What is thy right way? What would lead? What are the mistakes that you made? And again, this comes back to humility. It comes back to practice, and it's a day by day process. You're not going to go overnight, and I think this is what happens with a lot of people if they do drugs or they have, you know, these drastic experiences, they understand the why in that moment. And then you come off that drug and it's like, here you have all of this. You know, it's because when people are in that higher state, it's like, I don't care. I don't care. And that becomes, because it's almost you stole it. You robbed, uh, you got a deeper piece of truth, but you got it the wrong way. You have to pay the consequences of that. And I think it was explained brilliantly by David Hawkins, where he says, you know, when you take drugs or you have these experiences, which I think they happen naturally, but it's like it's on God's timeline, not our timeline, by seeking it. When you have these experiences, it's like the clouds disappearing and there's the sun, and that's who you are. You're at peace. You see the sun, you see clarity, you have clarity, and then the clouds come back. And now you have that thing. You'd almost be crazy not to do it again. So, and that's how people get stuck in that, because they don't have the answers. They don't have enough answers. So, bam, you don't need an answer when you're in that state of ecstasy, when you're in that state of just, I don't care. You're high. You're in a higher state of consciousness. Now, that higher state of consciousness is always there. It's available to everybody, but we have to face the lower parts of us, the parts of us that, and we have to be honest, we have to love the lower part of us, not love it in expression, but love it in the same way that Christ loved those who persecuted him. So, and that takes tremendous, it's not easy to do it. You know, that's to follow Christ is, you know, it's to follow him in completeness, that he's going to be hate you. When you follow that right way, you're going to be hated. You're not going to be liked. You're going to be ridiculed and misunderstood. And to bring it back to this, the reason your why is what's going to give up these things. And I think that as you rise in this, then you can be okay within the world. You know, there's I think there's a testing period, you could say. You know, for Christ that was 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. To be alone with that, the negative mind, the mind of wanting to, you know, why would I give up these things? Right? Because we experience these things of the world and they give us a certain sense of satisfaction. So to give that up would require a higher reason why you should give it up. You know, and I think this can be beautifully expressed in relationships. When you're in a relationship, a healthy relationship, a man who is not needy, he doesn't need the other person, but wants to be with the other person. When he wants to be with his wife, but he doesn't need, his source isn't in her, it's in a higher order. You know, and this goes back into the order of man, woman, children. And man should seek God. He should seek a higher purpose and lead his wife and children on that path. Because if he doesn't, his source of happiness is in his woman. And if his woman's not happy, he's not happy. Rather than he is aiming for a higher standard, because this is not fun. This is not a pathway. We have different roles in our society, and a lot of people disagree. I would be disagreeing with myself years ago. Years ago, I'd look at me and I go, well, who cares? Like, let everybody be happy, right? Subscribe to that idea. And as I've gotten older, I realized that we've really just all been tricked, because there's such a beautiful expression in masculine and feminine expressing their true nature, and men leading and women following, and both require a form of courage. But again, I didn't get those answers except I followed why. And that would just be an example of a lot of people just disagreeing on that one idea. And that's almost, I would say that's kind of surface level. What happens on the deeper ideas that we argue? You know, because we become so normalized in the wrong way of living. And again, me saying wrong way of living, that's going to upset people, because everybody's going to have that different view. And it's my goal to really aim to understand it even deeper as time goes on, because it's the thing, that it's that common sense. And we've lost our ability to communicate common sense because, again, to live in the world, it feels good to, I don't want to talk about politics. That's world. That's comfort. Christ is not someone who sat back on the sidelines. He's someone who engaged in it. And in engaging it, that's how you gain strength. And he made his enemies, he overcame his enemies through love. They hated him to the point where they killed him, but they didn't kill his idea. his idea lives on. And who knows, unsaid stories of people who were even against Christ, they changed their view after seeing what happened. That ripple effect, I believe, is absolutely real. And I think it still lives today. Those who truly follow Christ, they live it. You know it when you're around somebody who is exuded, who has that wisdom, who has that presence that really can convert people the right way. And you don't convert people by telling them about it. I think communication is a part of it. And, I think that it's one of the reasons why I made this channel is to communicate more effectively, to look back at old videos and say, how could I say this point better? How could I say that point better? How can I learn from other people? How could I guide other people from the wisdom that I've learned? And putting these all together, and it doesn't end. It keeps going. And it's a great game to play, and it's not easy. That's the thing. It's not easy to give up everything, give up all your possessions and follow Christ, and I think for some people that may not resonate. Give up my possessions. Why would I give up everything? Why would I give up? And I think it takes tremendous wisdom, because on the one hand, you give up everything, you learn what it is to kind of give that up, to deny yourself. And then you get to really experience having things, because once you have that experience and you really reflect on that, you meditate on the experience of giving up everything, then you can really truly enjoy the experience of having things in life. And I think ultimately that's the best relationship that we can have with the world, because then we're not dependent. We don't need the world, because at the end of the day, we're not going to take anything to our grave. And what a way to live, that you're not needy. You don't need validation from other people. You're not this vulture. You are living based on how you see the world and your highest operating system. You're aiming towards Christ. You're aiming on being the example for other people, which is humility, which is kindness, generous, speaking truth, correcting people, starting with yourself and being that example. Because when you're that example, so few people live up to that generally the inclination is jealousy. Generally, the inclination is projection, seeking those weak spots. And part of that is true. Part of that is you're going to want people to seek your weak spots. That's actually a sign of true strength, to go into an arena and say, please destroy my bad ideas, please, because that will make me better. What a great source of humility that's spoken about in Proverbs. The man um, who rejects uh, discipline. Yeah, the fool is the man who rejects discipline, corrected speech, right? Not corrected speech, but the idea is those who hate to be corrected are fools, right? Because that and there's, again, this goes back to this straight line, going into a deeper why, because sometimes you need to have the courage to double down and say this is the right way, or the point that you're making, and to stand firm in your convictions. And other times you have to have the willingness to be corrected. And I would say it's even harder to double down when you're truly in the right, and how you express that will prove whether you're truly in the right or not. You'll know it. This is why generally when you see debates and a lot of people maybe are not as wise and they watch, there's these kind of gotcha moments, because it's the person who truly is rooted in the higher truth that is able to make the point more clearly. So we know that, I think, on an intuitive level, when someone is speaking the truth, and when you have two people coming together who are regarded as high status in society arguing points, it's the one who is truly rooted in that will, at a certain point, that's who wins the argument. Well, whoever's higher or deeper rooted in truth. So to not make this video too long, I know I've already gone past the limit, as I usually do with these videos. This is really something to reflect on. Where are you at in the world? And if it's X, right? It's, again, I speak about porn addiction. It was easy to tell me at a young teenage age, hey, you shouldn't watch porn. I've heard it, but no one really had the conviction or expression, nor did I really care at the time, to really say it in a way that really resonated, that really said, hey, you know what, that makes sense. That makes sense. Delayed gratification. Oh, you're not going to give it up. It's delayed gratification. And why? Again, peeling back the layers of why. And most people have to make the mistake. And then you get the guilt, the shame, the regret, bad relationships, breaking up, disconnection on communication, you lose your authority. And most people don't realize that until they're much older. And I'm grateful to realize it now in my 30s. And I know I have a lot more that I have to go, but it is, this is the process of repentance. This process of saying why? Because as you go deeper into the world, it's harder to ask why because you're so attached to the world. You're dense. That's what it means when you're dense. You're so attached. You're so simple minded because you are getting something out of the world, but deep down in a place. And that's how your heart it gets hard because you're so earthly. You're so earthly. You're not rising above it. It's like it's like a caterpillar being stuck as a caterpillar, not expressing. It's like that moment it flies. It's like you're on a completely different way of seeing the world. But as a caterpillar, it's like, okay, this is what you're used to, and it's almost like explaining a caterpillar what it is to fly. You don't do it. You can't do it unless you're actually flying. And there's a lot of people. This is where the preachy thing comes in. To explain a why, I can only explain my why, for example, by sharing my experience and talking about, why I gave up porn, for example. But that doesn't just go away. That pull is always still there. Lust is still there. But it's the higher reasoning. It's like, oh, I see where it leads. It's just, and the same can be applied to life. I think sexual aspect can apply to life too. And one of the podcasts I did, I heard the idea of life's orgasms. What a great idea. I think it was from Justin Copeland. Life's orgasms, right? It's the orgasm of validation. Oh, it feels so good to be liked, right? And there's nothing wrong. Again, there's nothing wrong with validation. But if that's what you're depending on, and it's just dead because you just need the next high and the next high and the next high rather than you're aiming up. You're asking why? You're in a place where you're seeking such a higher truth that pull, it's like, yeah, that feels good, but I don't want it anymore. Rather than you must stop, you must not do this, you must not do that. It's like, no, just keep zooming in on the light, keep zooming in on the why. And again, it's a process of death too. So it's going to be painful because there's going to be those moments. It's like, why would you give that up? Why would you give that up? But those are the greatest stories. The people who give up, people who give up like a huge promotion, lots of money, and they settle for just less money because they actually love what they're doing and not the false love, not this, again, it's like, uh, it, it it's, it's this really deep, it's a deep conviction of why you're doing what you're doing. I think Simon Sinek has a great video. It's the golden circle. Well, most people can tell you what they do, right? This is what they have and what they do for work. Fewer people could tell you how they do it, right? That's a position of leadership. It's a deeper why. People ask questions, be in a position of leadership and how they do it. But the ultimate is why they do what they do. And that requires a really deep reflection, why they do what they do. Because when you really peel those layers back, most people would say they just do it for a paycheck. Few people could say, I do this because I absolutely love it. And I see this as a problem that needs to be solved in our world. And I want to help that with other people. And that's a really higher place to be. And it requires, again, deep and lots of whys, more humility. And, I think as you rise up too, you become an attractive person and there's more potential to fall. There's more pitfalls because you're answering questions that so few people have the ability to answer because they didn't want to look there. Nothing more than that, because this information is open to everybody who seeks. This idea of the kingdom of heaven is not just me. It's not just Christ. Christ came so that we may enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's found within us if we seek it. But that mind, let me tell you, wants to get in the way, wants to keep you in the world. And don't take my word for it. Think about it in your own life. Is that reign true in your life? Think about how many times we do the thing that we don't want to do. Well, why do we do it? Well, that's an uncomfortable question. It forces us to say, hey, you know what? There's a part of me that's really lower nature. It just wants this instant gratification. It wants this right here, right now. And it's like there's this inner spoiled kid within. I want this. I want that. It's going to give me this feeling. So to deny that, you have to accept that feeling. You have to be real with it. You have to be honest with it. You have to understand how that pattern of behavior works and why you've fallen for it in the past. And that's the catalyst to overcoming it. But if you deny it, again, out of pride, because a lot of people will live in pride, they say, well, I wouldn't, I'm a good person. I'm a nice person. Think about Pinocchio. I'm a good boy. Nose grows, right? I'm a real boy. Nose grows. He's not real. He's pulled by his strengths. And it's not until he faces adversity in that movie. It's not until he's challenged. His one wish for, and it's some of these movies. I got to do some of them, and I credit to Jordan Peterson on this. I mean, the idea of Pinocchio, his one wish from his father is to become real, to become a real boy. How do you become real? Well, you have to ask, well, what is real? Why is real what real is? Why? What would be the best game to play? And again, the purpose of the world is it's going to keep people there. And you'll get the fruits of the world. You'll get more suffering until you answer the question of why, which is another aspect of the Father. That's why we don't look the attachment of why is we don't say, one of the questions be why me? Why has all this happened to me? Well, it's not just you. What makes you think that's pride? Why is this pain? Because the pain is happening. That might be an answer because it just is. It's going to help you grow. But we don't look at pain like that, right? The world says, no pain, I want comfort. And it doesn't mean that you're going to want pain. It's not what you want pain. You don't want suffering. But you see that suffering is grace because that pain, it's how we come to see it. Why would I struggle about the pain? The pain is there. That sounds like a simple truth, but until we're in those situations when we have pain, when we're experiencing that pain, it's easy to say, well, there's plenty of fish in the sea, right? Until you're dealing with a breakup, until you're dealing with a divorce after 20, 30 years. It's a simple truth. But the why wasn't deep enough. We were saying the truths, but we didn't really know it in our heart. And that's really, I would say, at a certain point, you have those breakthroughs. The more you go down the why, the more you absolutely live it. You're not just saying it anymore. And I'd argue most people just say it, and when people hear it, it sounds nice, but it's 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 almost like quote porn. It's quote porn. And nothing wrong, I would say, in that regard. There's nothing wrong with quotes that have a lot of wisdom in it. And on a certain level, there's nothing wrong with it. But otherwise, we're just parrots. At a certain point in this life, we have to dive deeper. And it's going to be painful. The higher the level, the higher the devil. But it's necessary. And this includes me. It includes everybody. Everybody's going through that same process. Just how we choose to meet that pain, how we choose to meet the next level depends on how we see it. And when we see it, when we seek comfort, we're going closer to the world. We seek validation, we're going closer to the world. When we seek feelings over purpose, we're going closer to the world. And as we seek purpose, our why do we do what we do? How can I do it better? How can I see clearer? How can I deal with the pain and struggles of life? How could I deal with, God, I can't stand my boss. God, I can't stand my neighbor. God, I can't stand this person, that person. What is the part in you that is off? Where is the part in you that you're projecting onto other people? Even if it's true, even if you're dealing with someone who is difficult and hard, and how can you grow to love them? It's a great test. How can you grow to accept them as they are? That is really the epitome of Christ. That requires a deep why. And you can't negotiate the feelings and the pain away, the pain of frustration of other people, or the pain and frustration of struggling with things of the past or worrying about the future. You can't negotiate it away. You have to accept it. And you have to understand it. You have to understand it on a deep level. And it helps to be around like-minded people too. Iron sharpens iron. It's good to have like-minded people who they're seeking the same common sense that we all have within, and to understand it deeper, the ability to endure. It's very rare that you find people like that, especially now. It's important why I made this channel as well, because I realized how crazy the world was, and I realized how crazy I was, and I realized what's required of really just starting to answer the questions, entering the arena. One of my favorite quotes, entering the arena. As stupid and naive as I am, I don't have all the answers, but I have some, and I need that to grow more. I need to have more answers so that I can navigate through this world intentionally, so I can navigate more efficiently. so I can navigate to reduce other people's sufferings where I can, and to guide people the right way, thy way, not my way. Not take away people's suffering, but to guide them through it to become stronger. That to me is the highest why. To deny yourself and follow Christ. What makes you deny yourself? Well, you're going to look like a fool. You're a nice guy. You're a people pleaser. Why would I deny myself? Well, these are questions of why. Why? When you ask enough whys, when you get to a certain amount of whys, something else takes over. There's a peace within, and things become a lot simpler. Things become a lot more peaceful. They can be chaotic out here, which I believe will continue to happen because as people continue to want the world, they want more comfort, they want more money. And a lot of people now, they're saying that exact thing. How can I get more money? How can I escape the matrix with more of the matrix? That's how crazy it is right now. And I'd say there's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with financial independence. You know, for someone who has struggled with debt in my life, it is something that, you know, there's a lot of truth there. There's a lot of good things out of financial independence, and there's nothing wrong with money in and of itself. It's the tool. It's how we choose to use that tool. But chasing money, thinking more money will make you happy, thinking that worldly pleasures will make you more happy. It's a trap. And I'm not saying that as this, you know, I'm not saying this as this knight in shining armor. Look how great I've fallen for the world just as much as other people. But the the trap is that how can you get to a place where you don't need anything from the world? You're totally in a place of trust. You know, and again, I think the best thing that people, one of the greatest ways to relate to that is those, you know, the best ways, those moments of clarity through deep prayer, deep meditation, and living a life worth sharing with other people, being the light, being the example. And when people get clarity, that's the best way, through internal and trusting it day by day, because then it comes at the right time in the right ways. But the other one is what we have fallen for in the world, whether it be deep sexual connection. You know, that's something you can't really explain, but it brings tremendous feelings of satisfaction. And they're close. They mirror deeper truths. That's why people are on like cloud nine when they're in a fresh relationship, or they're on you know, they're having things going good in their life. It's emulating this higher state. But it's in those moments where when we lose those things, do we still have that higher state? And that requires a lot more discipline. It requires a lot more whys. And it's why so few people do it. And again, it comes from being real. It comes from being real what you're getting out of the world. I think that is really, you know, I think it's necessary, because otherwise we're pretending like the world isn't giving us anything. You don't just go from nothing to everything. And when people are on these states, that's why, to wrap up on this point, that's why people are in these high states when they're on drugs or drinking or whatever it is, with the another exception of near death experiences, they instantly get it. It's that aha moment that other people are looking for. But it's you're short circuiting. You're short circuiting to that clarity. And that clarity comes through its opposite. The pleasure, the true pleasure, the deeper pleasure of life comes through going through the pain. And it is painful in different ways. And it's graceful to go through it gracefully, which is why Christ said, when you fast, don't tell other people about it. Don't do it. Do it day by day and practice it. Practice what it is to have a relationship with pain. And I tell you, that I think is a great place for people to start too. Try fasting. Just try fasting. You know your own situation, how you would go about it, how many days you would start, or how many hours you would start for some people, and just try doing that and just being in a good mood. Now, I mean, the Snickers commercial comes to mind. Most people can't deal with that. They have to have a Snickers. That's that part of us that's just, it's worldly. So to give it up, you have to have this conversation, this truth with yourself, and that comes with real talk. So this is, I covered a lot of points. I definitely went longer, but I think it's something that I need to hear, something that I needed to hear when I was younger. But this idea of giving these things up, giving up the world, and that's what makes the world come to you. That's what makes you an attractive person versus a vulture, trying to get something out of the world. And we know when we're around that. Intuitively, we know. So this is a call for you to step up your game, to deny the world, deny the parts of you. Of course, you want these things. You want money, you want power, you want status. People say they don't want power. There's true power, which is of God, and there's the authority because then you're integrous. That's the ultimate authority. That's the real power versus you would say political power where you're appearing to be a certain way. But the more real you are, the more honest you are with where you're at in life, that's true power. That's the power of Christ. And few people go that way. And to me, it seems to be the best way to go. And even though I say that now, I reflect on when Peter denied Christ 3 times. How many times do we deny other people because validation? I think 2020 was a great example of that. People, negotiating whether they get an injection in their body because they don't want to lose their job. So again, there's it's easy to say this. Oh, all I have to do is ask why. Yeah, but then you have to take action based off of that why, which comes from inner clarity. And the ultimate is of Christ. What makes somebody who's mocked and hated and crucified say, forgive them, they know not what they do? Only a man who understands within himself that he is the source within, the source is within him. And they hated that because they didn't have that within themselves. I tell you, this is not a path for the weak. I understand that in my old life. That's why I continue to stay humble. It's easy to say I would follow Christ. It really is. It's easy to say it, but to live it, that's why so few people do it. And just because I talk about it on this doesn't mean I'm not going to face these challenges. Just because I say this doesn't mean that um, I would do the right thing in all these situations. But I know in my heart that it is the right way. And for the people that are following me, I know that that this is the right way. Because you wouldn't be following me if you weren't like-minded, if you didn't like what I have to say on a certain level. And I need the same strength from other people around me to inspire me in my weak moments and in my strong moments to inspire you that the x-axis, the world, is not where you're going to find freedom. It's only in your why. And the higher you go up in your why, the more you'll understand the same message. And not only understand it, but to live it.